They thought they buried me with my father. They didn't realize I was the seed. Look at a mansion long enough, and you won't see the marble pillars or the gold leaf ceilings. You'll see the ghosts. The Thorne estate sat on the highest hill in Geneva, a monument to a century of ruthless ambition. For the last 10 years, it belonged to Arthur Thorne, my uncle, the man who smiled at my father's funeral while simultaneously signing the papers that transferred my family's entire legacy into his own name. They called my father a thief, an embezzler who drained the family trust and fled. When the police came, my father didn't run. He looked at Arthur, his own brother, and said, "The ledger is in the walls." Arthur just smiled and whispered, "There are no walls left, Julian." My father died in a maximum security prison 3 months later. A tragic suicide. I was 20 years old, stripped of my inheritance, my name, and my dignity. Arthur didn't just take the money, he took my future. He paid for a cheap boarding school in another country and told the world the Thorne bloodline's black sheep had been dealt with. But Arthur made one miscalculation. He thought exile would break me. He didn't realize that exile gives you the one thing money cannot buy: time and silence. I didn't spend the last 10 years crying. I spent them learning. I learned how offshore accounts hide in the Cayman Islands. I learned how shell companies swallow debts. I learned that a man's pride is the exact structural weak point of his empire. My name is Elias Thorne, and I am finally home. You don't attack a fortress from the front, you buy the architect. Arthur Thorne's company, Thorne Global, was bleeding. The market had shifted, and Arthur's arrogance had left him with massive, hidden debts. He needed a savior. He needed capital. I didn't walk through the front doors of Thorne Global as Elias. I walked in as Mr. Vance, a mysterious, reclusive private equity investor from Singapore. I wore bespoke suits that cost more than my father's first car. I spoke with a refined, clipped accent that masked my origins. I had spent 5 years building a shadow empire, funneling billions through a labyrinth of holding companies. I was worth 10 times what Arthur's entire company was worth. When I sat across from Arthur in his mahogany boardroom, he didn't recognize me. Why would he? I was 20 when he ruined me. I was 30 now. My jaw was sharper, my eyes colder, and my soul was entirely made of ice. "Mr. Vance," Arthur said, his smile dripping with that familiar, sickening charm. "We are honored. Your firm's offer to inject $50 million into Thorne Global is unprecedented." I looked at him. I looked at the man who signed my father's death warrant. I felt a surge of rage so hot it almost blinded me, but I let it freeze. "The money is there, Arthur," I said, my voice smooth as glass. "But my firm requires full auditing rights and a seat on the board. I need to see every ledger, every account, every secret." Arthur hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. But I saw it. The fear. "Of course, Mr. Vance. Welcome to the family." If only he knew how literal those words were. A family empire doesn't fall because of bad investments. It falls because the family stops trusting each other. Arthur had 2 children, Julian Jr., his arrogant, gambling-addicted son, and Clara, his brilliant but overlooked daughter. Arthur treated Julian like a king and Clara like a secretary. I started with Julian. I took him to high-stakes poker games in Monaco. I let him win. Then I let him lose. I lent him money, $5 million, $10 million, $20 million, all off the books. When he couldn't pay, I didn't ask for the money. I asked for his loyalty. I made him feed me information about his father's secret meetings, his hidden mistresses, his offshore bribes. Julian thought he was playing me. He didn't realize he was the pawn. Then I went to Clara. I found her in the archives late one night. She was crying over a discrepancy in the old financial reports. "You're looking at the 2014 transfers," I said, stepping out of the shadows. She jumped. "Who are you? This is restricted." "I'm the man who can fix it," I replied, sliding a folder across the table. "Your father didn't just mismanage the company, Clara. He stole from your branch of the family, from your late Uncle Julian." Clara opened the folder. Her eyes widened as she read the forged documents Arthur had created to frame my father. "Why are you showing me this?" she whispered. "Because," I said softly, "a king cannot rule if his knights know he's a fraud. When the time comes, Clara, I need you to choose the truth over your blood." Within 6 months, I had the son in my pocket and the daughter in my camp. Arthur was entirely alone, sitting on a throne of lies, completely unaware that the foundations were already turned to ash. The trap was set for the night of the Thorne Global 50th Anniversary Gala. Arthur had planned a massive announcement. He was going to merge the company with a European conglomerate, securing his legacy forever. To do it, he needed my final signature as the majority silent partner. The ballroom was glittering with chandeliers, champagne, and the elite of the city. Arthur stood on the stage, looking every bit the untouchable patriarch. "Ladies and gentlemen," Arthur's voice boomed over the speakers, "tonight we secure our future. I present to you our primary investor, Mr. Vance." The crowd applauded. I walked up the stairs to the stage. I wore a tuxedo that fit like armor. I took the microphone. Arthur stood beside me, beaming, holding the gold pen ready to sign the merger documents. "Thank you, Arthur," I said into the mic. My voice echoed through the silent, massive hall. "It's an honor to be here, to finally come home." I looked out at the crowd. I saw Clara in the front row, her face pale, clutching her purse. I saw Julian by the bar, sweating, avoiding my eyes. And I looked at Arthur. "Before we sign," I continued, "I'd like to share a story about a man who loved his brother so much he had to destroy him." Arthur's smile faltered. "Mr. Vance, perhaps the business details can wait." "No, Arthur," I interrupted, my voice dropping an octave, losing the fake accent, returning to my natural, cold tone. "The details are exactly what we are here for." I snapped my fingers. The massive LED screen behind the stage, which was supposed to show the company's stock projections, flickered. Instead, it showed bank statements, wire transfers, and a video. It was a security camera footage from 10 years ago. Arthur, in his office, transferring my father's shares into his own name, and then making a phone call to the prison warden to ensure my father's suicide was arranged. The crowd gasped. The silence in the room was deafening. Arthur's face went from red to white to a terrifying, ghostly gray. He dropped the gold pen. It clattered against the wooden stage. Who are you?" Arthur stammered, his voice trembling. "Security, turn this off." "No one is turning anything off," I said, stepping closer to him. I leaned into the microphone. "Hello, Uncle Arthur. It's been a long time. Do you remember the ledger in the walls? I found it." "Elias?" Arthur whispered. The color completely drained from his face. His knees actually buckled. He grabbed the podium to stay standing. "Elias, you're dead. You're nothing." "I am nothing," I agreed softly, "just like you are about to be." I turned to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, the merger is canceled. Furthermore, as of 10 minutes ago, the holding company I represent has purchased 51% of Thorne Global's debt, which means, legally, I own this company, I own this estate, and I own him," I pointed at Arthur. 2 men in dark suits, my private security, stepped out from the wings. They weren't regular security, they were federal investigators. I had spent the last 3 years building a RICO case against Arthur, using the evidence Julian and Clara had given me. "Arthur Thorne," the lead agent said, pulling out handcuffs, "you are under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder." As they dragged him away, Arthur wasn't screaming. He was crying. He looked at his son, Julian, but Julian just looked away. He looked at his daughter, Clara. but she stood up and walked out of the ballroom. He was entirely, utterly alone. He looked back at me one last time as they pushed him through the doors. "Why?" he mouthed. I didn't answer. Because the truth was too heavy. I didn't do this just for the money. I did it to show him that everything he built, everything he sacrificed his soul for, could be taken away in a single night. The next morning, the rain was falling just as hard as it was the day my father died. I stood in the master office of the Thorne estate. The mahogany desk was mine now. The view of the city was mine. The empire was mine. I opened the bottom drawer of the desk. Inside, hidden behind a false panel, was a small leather-bound book, my father's ledger, the proof of his innocence. I held it in my hands, feeling the worn leather. I had won. I had destroyed the man who ruined my life. I had reclaimed my family's name. So why did it feel so cold? Revenge is a fire, they tell you. It keeps you warm in the dark. But they forget to mention that once you burn your enemies to the ground, you have to live in the ashes. I placed the ledger on the desk, poured a glass of scotch, and looked out at the rain. The Thorne Empire was mine, but the ghosts would always be here.